Crane was a drummer from age 11, and he began his entertainment career as a radio personality, beginning in Hornell, New York, and later in Connecticut. He then moved to Los Angeles, where he hosted the #1 rated morning radio show. In the early 1960s, Crane moved into acting, eventually landing the lead role of Colonel Robert Hogan in Hogan's Heroes. The series aired from 1965 to 1971, and Crane received 2 Emmy Award nominations. Crane's career declined after Hogan's Heroes. He became frustrated with the few roles that he was being offered and began performing in dinner theatre. In 1975, he returned to television in the NBC series The Bob Crane Show, but the series received poor ratings and was cancelled after 13 weeks. Afterward, Crane returned to performing in dinner theatre and also appeared in occasional guest spots on television. In 1949, Crane married his high school sweetheart, Ann Terzian, with whom he would eventually have 3 children, Robert David, Deborah Ann, and Karen Leslie. Crane began his career in radio in Hornell, New York, in Bristol, Connecticut, in Bridgeport, and Boston's. His success in the East led to an offer to relocate in 1956 to Los Angeles and host the morning show at where he became known as the King of the Los Angeles airwaves. His show filled the broadcast booth with sly wit, drums, and often movie stars. His show was the #1 rated morning program in LA, and stars such as Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, and Bob Hope were guests. But Crane had a higher ambition and pursued acting opportunities. When Carl Reiner guested on the show, Crane persuaded Reiner to book him on The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961. This was where he was spotted by Donna Reed, who eventually cast him in the recurring role as neighbor Dr. Dave Kelsey, 1963-1965. He also acted small roles in the dramatic films Return to Peyton Place and Mantrap. In 1965, Crane was offered the starring role in a television comedy pilot about Allied prisoners in a German POW camp, Hogan's Heroes. The character of the wisecracking Colonel Robert Hogan fit Crane like a glove, and the show, which had the rebellious spirit of Stalag 17 and The Great Escape, became a hit, finishing in the top 10 during the 1965-66 season. The basic concept was that Hogan and his team led the Nazis to believe that the camp was escape-proof so that they could continue their secret activities. There was some controversy at the beginning of the show's run as to whether this kind of material was appropriate for a sitcom, but that soon passed. Hogan's Heroes went on for 6 seasons, and Crane was nominated for an Emmy twice in 1966 and 1967. During this time, Crane met Patricia Olson, who played Hilda on Hogan's Heroes under the stage name Sigrid Valdis. Crane divorced his wife of 20 years and married Patricia on the set of the show in 1970. They had a son, Scotty, the following year. After Hogan's Heroes was cancelled in 1971, Crane continued to act, appearing in 2 Disney films, Superdad, 1974, and Gus, 1976, and had numerous guest spots on TV shows like Policewoman, Ellery Queen, Quincy, and The Love Boat. He had his own TV show, The Bob Crane Show, in 1975, but it was cancelled by NBC after 3 months. Crane's beginner's luck co-star, Victoria Berry, would knock on Bob Crane's door at the Winfield Place Apartments at around 2 p.m. on June 29th. The front door to his apartment, 132 AA, was closed, but unlocked. Berry would enter the apartment and find the entire apartment dark. As she entered the bedroom, she said, "At first, I thought it was a girl with long, dark hair, because all the blood had turned real dark. I thought, oh, Bob's got a girl here. Now where's Bob? I thought, well, she's done something to herself. Bob has gone to get help." At that time I recognized blood. It was like a strange feeling, Upon closer examination and realizing what exactly she was seeing, Berry thought the whole wall was covered from one end to the other with blood, and I just sort of stood there, and I was numb. Bob was balled up into a fetal position, lying on his side. He had a cord around his neck which was tied in a bow. There were no physical signs that a struggle had taken place, and the autopsy determined that Bob Crane was asleep when the deadly blow to the left side of his head was delivered. The
subsequent police investigation had determined that Crane's head was struck by two separate parts of a camera tripod, inflicting two separate and deadly wounds. Paulette, the first Scottsdale police officer to arrive on the scene, immediately secured the area with crime scene tape. At approximately 3:00 p.m., Scottsdale police leader Ron Dean arrived at Crane's apartment and took over the investigation. Initially, investigators surmised that the killer was someone Crane knew. Perhaps a person who left the apartment before the incident and later returned through the unlocked front door, or perhaps a window that had been purposefully left unlocked or open. The Maricopa County medical examiner was able to put together a partial chronology of events on that evening. Sometime during the early hours of Thursday, June 29th, while Crane was sleeping on his right side, the murderer would strike a deadly blow to the left side of Crane's head with some type of heavy, blunt instrument. A second, much lighter blow would crush in Bob Crane's skull, likely killing him immediately. For some unknown reason, the perpetrator likely then tied an electrical cord tightly around the actor's neck. But by that time, Crane was already dead. Before fleeing the scene, the killer would apparently wipe the blood from the murder weapon using the bed sheets, and then pull the sheet up over Crane's head. Money was found in Crane's wallet, which likely eliminates robbery as a motive. Why he had a long-standing fetish of videotaping himself and his female sex partner, of which there were many over the years, in various stages of sexual acts. It was rumors of this kind of activity, as well as other penchants like playing drums at various topless bars in LA, that purportedly cost Crane many TV and movie acting gigs. Apparently, producers were fearful of having their screen product associated with such a two-sided man. Approximately 50 pornographic videotapes were found at the Winfield apartment, as well as professional photography equipment in the bathroom for developing and enlarging still shots. A negative strip was found in the enlarger, revealing a woman in both clothed and nude poses. A hefty album of similar pornographic pictures was missing from the death scene. Several items that the police declined to identify were missing from Crane's little black bag, a small multi-zippered carrier that he always carted around with him. Dawson, another co-star of Hogan's Heroes. Crane and Dawson shared a common passion, women. But more often than not, Carpenter was left to fend for Crane's leftovers since, due to Crane's popularity and legendary charm, there were plenty of women to go around. In return, Carpenter provided Crane with plenty of state-of-the-art video toys. The night before Crane's murder, Carpenter was sitting with Victoria Berry at the Windmill Dinner Theater. She would join him during her set breaks. Berry claims that after the show ended, she witnessed Crane and Carpenter exit the building together and proceed to Crane's car, where Crane would call out to her to not forget their appointment the next day. As Berry was writing her official statement to the police in Crane's kitchen at around 3:15 p.m., the phone rang. Dean instructed her to answer the phone, but to not mention anything about Bob Crane. It was John Carpenter calling from L.A. The police lieutenant took the phone from Berry, properly identified himself, and Carpenter that the police were in Crane's apartment, investigating an incident. During the phone call, Carpenter told Lieutenant Dean he had been out with Crane the previous evening until around 1 a.m. Carpenter would later change that time to 2:45 a.m. He then went on to say that he had driven by himself to the airport later that morning for his return flight to L.A. There was also a fellow actor who had argued with Crane in Texas and later had sworn vengeance. And, inevitably and unsurprising, given Crane's reputation with the ladies, there were numerous angry husbands and boyfriends. Still, Carpenter remained the prime suspect. Some who had been interviewed claimed that Crane's relationship to Carpenter had begun to show some strain, though actual evidence of any rift was not readily available. Any physical evidence that might have tied Carpenter to the crime was also scarce, as was the motive that would have compelled him to murder his best friend. But the possibility of a loan and one bit of compelling evidence, however slim, seemed to point to Carpenter. Rumors flourished that Carpenter had borrowed $15,000 from Crane. Crane may have been demanding repayment. Perhaps even more compelling, the police discovered a small blood smear on the passenger side door of Carpenter's rented vehicle. Carpenter had complained about a problem with the electrical wiring with the car, and it had been sent for repairs at the Phoenix dealership. Scottsdale debtor Darwin Barry inspected the vehicle and claims to have noticed a small amount of dried blood in the interior. His commanding officer, Deanne, ordered the car towed to the DPI compound in Phoenix. The car was examined and photographed by criminologist Bruce Bergstrom of the Arizona Department of Public Safety. The blood that was found in John Carpenter's car was eventually tested and was determined to be type B. Coincidentally, the same blood type as Bob Crane. Carpenter's blood was the more common type A blood. Type B blood is only found in slightly more than 10% of the population. Though the presence PF, the same blood type in Carpenter's car, was suspicious, blood type was not a good measure of positively identifying a victim. Remember, this was before DNA testing. In 1992, determining that tissue collected in Carpenter's rental car matched that found at the murder scene, investigators reopened the murder case. Additionally, investigators determined that Crane had been beaten with a second tripod that was not found at the murder scene, but was featured in many of the videos. The county attorney's office had determined there was enough evidence to try Carpenter for the death of Bob Crane, so the case went to court in 1994. But following a 2-month-long trial, Carpenter was acquitted and would die 4 years later, totally maintaining his innocence in the death of Bob Crane. Though the full truth of the unsolved murder will probably never be known, rumors abound that a boyfriend or husband of one of Crane's female co-stars is the culprit. On the night of Crane's last performance, a flat tire caused by a tampered valve stem is suspected to have been intended to strand Crane alone in the club's dark parking lot. Who knows?